The morning air in the Great Smoky Mountains was cool and fresh, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. Mist clung to the forest floor as sunlight filtered gently through tall trees, casting golden beams across the winding trail. Michael Grant adjusted the straps of his backpack, glancing over at his 9-year-old daughter, Ellie, who was bouncing with excitement beside him. She wore a bright purple jacket and clutched a small pink backpack that looked far too light for a real hike, but she insisted on carrying her own things. Her energy was contagious, and Michael couldn't help but smile as he handed her a water bottle. It was their special weekend, just the two of them. A father-daughter trip to the Smokies, something Michael had promised months ago. He'd taken time off work, planned a short hike on the Trillium Gap Trail, and packed snacks, a camera, and a trail map. Ellie had begged to come along ever since she saw pictures of the waterfalls. He wanted to give her a memory she'd never forget. The trail was moderate, well-traveled, and considered safe for families. What could possibly go wrong? They started off strong, moving steadily past patches of wildflowers and damp leaves. Birds chirped in the treetops, and Ellie kept stopping to point out mushrooms and squirrels. Michael captured everything with his DSLR, her smile, the way her curly hair bounced as she walked, and the light in her eyes every time she discovered something new. A few hikers passed them going the other direction, all smiles and nods. Everything felt perfect. Around mid-morning, they reached Grotto Falls, the trail's most famous feature. Water tumbled down mossy rocks into a crystal-clear pool. Ellie squealed and ran toward the edge, dipping her fingers in the chilly water. Michael set up the tripod to take a few photos. A park ranger passed by and noted their presence in his daily log, the last official record of their hike. They rested there, shared sandwiches, and talked about camping trips they could take in the future. Ellie wanted to see bears. Michael promised she'd get the chance, someday. After lunch, Ellie asked if they could explore a little further. Michael checked his watch. They had time, plenty of daylight left. They continued past the falls, deeper into the trail. It was quieter now, fewer people, fewer sounds of the outside world. The forest felt thicker, the trail narrower. Then they noticed a faint side path, nearly hidden beneath the brush. It wasn't marked on the map. Michael hesitated, studying it. Ellie tugged his sleeve and asked if it led to something cool. Maybe another waterfall. Just a quick detour, he thought. They stepped off the main trail. The path was soft with moss and fallen leaves. As they walked, the forest grew darker, denser. Sunlight barely reached the ground. The sounds of other hikers faded behind them. Ellie walked closer to her father, her hand finding his. He gave it a gentle squeeze and smiled, but his eyes scanned the woods, unsettled by the sudden stillness. They walked for 10 more minutes before Michael stopped and turned around. Everything looked different. He tried to retrace their steps, but the path behind them had faded into the forest. No signs, no footprints, just trees stretching endlessly in all directions. Ellie looked up at him with wide eyes, sensing his change in tone. He knelt down, keeping his voice calm, told her it was fine, they'd just backtrack slowly. But no matter which way they turned, they didn't recognize the surroundings. The woods had swallowed the trail completely. That night, they didn't return to the parking lot. When rangers checked the trail logs and noticed the names of Michael and Ellie with no sign-out time, alarms were raised. Search teams mobilized at dawn. Helicopters flew over the area, dogs sniffed the forest floor, and volunteers shouted their names for days. Nothing. Only a single pink shoe was found on the edge of a steep drop. No gear, no camera, no bodies, just empty woods and a silence that grew heavier with each passing hour. The town nestled at the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains had learned to live with unanswered questions. Time passed, but the disappearance of Michael and Ellie Grant had left an invisible scar, one that pulsed quietly beneath daily life. In the weeks and months after the search was called off, posters had slowly vanished from store windows. The search parties dwindled, and the helicopters stopped flying overhead. But the silence that replaced them was heavier somehow, more oppressive. Every August, close to the anniversary of their disappearance, a small vigil was held at the ranger station. Locals gathered with candles and quiet prayers. Michael's wife, Laura, never missed one. Each year, her face looked a little thinner, a little more withdrawn. She had stopped speaking to reporters long ago. The news cycle had moved on, but she hadn't. She still kept Ellie's room exactly the same, unwashed clothes in the hamper, favorite toys lined up on the shelf. Every so often, she'd wake in the night certain she had heard a child's voice calling her name. The park rangers didn't forget either. Most had given up hope of ever finding new evidence, but a few still walked the trails near Grotto Falls, eyes scanning the trees more out of habit than belief. The forest had offered no clues, no fresh signs, no remains. Only once had something surfaced, a child's shoe, caught in a tangle of roots near a sharp drop. But even that had seemed out of place, as if the forest had decided to return a piece of the mystery just to tease them. Locals told their own stories. Some swore they'd heard screams in the woods late at night. Others talked about strange shapes in the mist or lights deeper in the forest where no trail led. Most dismissed them as tall tales, fueled by whiskey and imagination. But even those who scoffed tended to lock their doors early and warned tourists not to wander off the marked paths. The online world had its theories too. Forums dedicated to true crime, disappearances, and wilderness mysteries kept the case alive in their own way. Users posted, "The forest was quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot and the distant call of a woodpecker." Two college students, Amy and Logan, were deep into an off-trail hike in a lesser-known region of the Smokies, far from the marked paths and weekend tourists. They were photography majors, chasing light and texture for their senior projects. Amy had found the location through an old blog post about hidden spots in the national park. The area was rugged, with jagged rocks and thick undergrowth, but that was exactly what made it exciting. This was the kind of raw, untouched wilderness that could give their work something different. As they climbed a steep ridge, Logan paused to catch his breath, wiping sweat from his brow. The slope was rough and covered in loose rock. Amy was already ahead, crouched near a rocky crevice that cut into the cliffside like a dark scar. She called out, her voice echoing off the stone. "Hey, there's something down here." Logan scrambled over, curious. At first, it just looked like a pile of fallen branches jammed into the narrow crack, but as Amy leaned in, she saw something glinting faintly in the dim light. She reached in carefully, brushing away dirt and moss. Her fingers closed around something metallic. With a grunt, she tugged it free. It was a camera, an old DSLR, scratched and dented, the lens cracked but still attached. Dirt was packed into the corners, and a thin layer of rust had begun to spread across the metal casing. It looked like it had been wedged in there for a long time. "What the hell?" Logan muttered, taking it from her and turning it over. "This thing's ancient." Amy frowned, brushing at the grime. Why would a camera be stuck in a crevice like that? Someone must have dropped it. Or, maybe it fell. They sat there for a moment, staring at the object in silence. It felt heavy in Logan's hands, not just physically, but in some unspoken way. Like it had a story to tell. Back at their cabin that night, they plugged the camera into Amy's laptop, not expecting much. The battery was long dead, but the memory card was still intact. With a few clicks, the folder opened. Dozens of thumbnails loaded across the screen. Amy leaned forward, her breath catching in her throat. "Wait, these are old." They began clicking through the images. A man and a young girl, smiling at the camera. Hiking through the woods. Stopping by a waterfall. Sitting on a log eating lunch. The photos grew more recent, closer angles, slightly blurrier. Then the tone shifted. A photo of the man looking over his shoulder, tense. Another of the little girl holding his hand tightly, her face pale. The forest behind them seemed darker, more menacing. The light was dim, shadows stretched long. In the final few photos, the camera seemed to be moving erratically, tilted or half covered by fingers, as though it had been dropped or snatched. The last image froze them both. It was taken from the ground, the camera tilted slightly, as if it had fallen. The man was crouched protectively over the girl, his face turned towards something outside the frame. His expression was pure fear. The girl's mouth was open, mid-scream or calling out. And behind them, just a blur. A shadow. Something tall, or wide, or twisted, they couldn't tell. Amy backed away from the screen. That's them." Logan looked at her, confused. "Who?" "That dad and daughter who went missing. Years ago. I remember the story. They were never found." She pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she typed their names into a search engine. Within seconds, an old missing persons flyer appeared. Michael and Ellie Grant. Disappeared in the Smokies. Never recovered. The photo on the flyer was the same man and girl from the memory card. Same clothes. Same faces. Amy stared at the image on her screen again. The forest had given up a secret. But something about that last photo said it hadn't given up all of it. Technicians in the regional park office leaned over a laptop screen, the room silent except for the low hum of the computer. The recovered DSLR camera, now cleaned and carefully handled with gloves, had already caused a stir when the photos were partially accessed by the hikers who found it. Now, in the hands of investigators and forensic analysts, the images were being examined with care, frame by frame, as if the story they told might shift with each pixel. The first batch of photos were innocent, almost cheerful. Michael and Ellie Grant, captured mid-laugh on a bright, sunny trail. Ellie made funny faces at the camera, posing beside tree trunks and rocks. Michael had taken several shots of her kneeling beside a stream, pointing at frogs, skipping stones. It was clear they were enjoying their hike. But as the photos progressed, something changed. The smiles began to fade. The composition of the photos grew hurried, less deliberate. Some shots were blurry, others off-center, as though taken while moving. A close-up of Michael's face showed a tightness in his expression that hadn't been there before, lips slightly parted, eyes focused behind the lens. The timestamp on that photo showed it had been taken nearly 2 hours after they were last seen near Grotto Falls. Another image followed, Michael holding Ellie's hand, his other hand outstretched toward the camera as if gesturing, "Stay back," or "Go back." Ellie looked confused, almost frightened. In the background, the trees grew darker, denser. There was no clear trail visible. The text scrolled further. More photos, taken quickly and chaotically, some completely black, others overexposed. Then, one showed the opening to what appeared to be a cave or natural rock shelter, hidden beneath overgrown vines and moss. Michael and Ellie stood at its edge. Ellie was looking inside, hesitating. "This doesn't match any marked location on the map," said one of the rangers, leaning in. "That cave, it's not on any trail." Then came the final few photos. They were silent screams frozen in digital time. Michael's arm around Ellie, holding her close. Her eyes wide with fear, face half lit by the faint glow of a flashlight. One image was tilted and caught the side of Michael's face, his mouth open as if shouting, and beyond him, only darkness. But it was the last photo that sent a chill through the room. Taken at ground level, the camera had clearly been dropped or had fallen. The image was partially obscured by dirt and a crack across the lens. But still, it was sharp enough to see Michael crouched low, both arms protectively wrapped around Ellie. His face was pale, eyes fixed on something just outside the edge of the frame. Ellie was behind him, her hands over her ears, crouched low. And there, barely visible, was something else. A strange blur in the shadows behind the trees. Not a person, not an animal, just a shape. Towering, dark, unnatural. The analysts zoomed in, adjusted contrast and exposure, but couldn't make sense of it. No clear form, no identifying features. Just a silhouette that seemed wrong, too large, too distorted to belong to any known creature. The timestamp on the last image was hours after the last confirmed sighting of them. The battery must have died shortly after. "This is more than just getting lost," one of the detectives whispered. The park authorities immediately sent teams to search the cave area visible in the photo. But GPS coordinates were impossible to extract from the old camera. The background was vague, and the Smoky Mountains were vast. Still, the photos were now national news. And for the first time in 5 years, the mystery of Michael and Ellie Grant had a heartbeat again, pulsing from the dark corners of a forest that seemed to watch more than it revealed. Heavy boots sank into the damp earth as a fresh search team pushed deeper into the dense, overgrown forest. The area shown in the final photos from the recovered camera had been carefully analyzed, cross-referenced with old topographic maps and satellite images. A narrow quadrant was marked, a place just beyond the known trails, forgotten by most hikers and unmapped in official park records. It was there that investigators believed the cave in the photos might be hiding. Thick fog clung to the trees as the team advanced, machetes slicing through the underbrush. The forest here felt different. Silent. As if it was holding its breath. There were no signs of recent human activity, no trash, no boot prints, no campfire remains. Only moss-covered rocks, tangled vines, and an overwhelming sense of isolation. Then they found it. A ranger called out from ahead, his voice echoing sharply. The others gathered around, eyes widening at the dark slit in the rock face. It matched the cave entrance from the photo. Nearly hidden by time and vegetation, the opening was just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Flashlights clicked on. Guns and radios were checked. They entered cautiously. Inside, the air was cool and stale. The beam of the flashlight danced over the jagged interior, walls marked by water erosion and twisted tree roots. Farther in, the cave widened. Dust and leaves covered the floor, undisturbed. But then someone stepped on something with a sharp crunch. A cracked flashlight. Near it, buried in dirt and sticks, lay a torn child's backpack, faded pink, with cartoon characters barely visible on the fabric. Inside, they found small, water-damaged drawings. Crayon pictures, childlike and innocent. One showed a smiling sun, a stick figure family. Another showed tall trees, and a strange shape in black at their center. Forensics teams were called in. Outside the cave, behind a large boulder, searchers discovered a shallow depression in the earth. With care, they began digging. What they found next confirmed everyone's worst fears. Fragments of bone. Not a full skeleton, only partial remains, but DNA analysis later confirmed they belonged to Michael Grant. There was no sign of Ellie's body. Her drawings were the only trace of her beyond that day. The discovery was national news within hours. News vans parked outside the ranger station. Interviews were held. Reporters asked whether foul play was involved. Officials hesitated. Nothing in the evidence suggested another person had been with them. No third set of footprints. No signs of a struggle. No injuries consistent with an attack by animal or man. Yet the final image on the camera, and the strange silhouette captured in the background, lingered in everyone's mind. Something had driven Michael and Ellie off the trail. Something had led them to that hidden cave. And something had kept them there. Back at home, Michael's widow was finally able to bury a part of her husband, holding a small ceremony with family and close friends. But without Ellie, it brought no true closure. Online forums exploded with theories. Cryptid hunters, conspiracy theorists, and amateur sleuths dissected the photos, claiming the blurry figure resembled everything from Bigfoot to a government experiment. Park officials dismissed the chatter, but privately, some rangers refused to go near that part of the forest again. One young ranger, new to the job, asked a senior officer what he thought had happened. The older man just looked out at the shadowy trees and said, "This forest has secrets it doesn't always want to share." And somewhere, in the vast silence of the Smokies, a child's voice may have once cried out, lost in the wind, unanswered, and unheard.